Come on in. Pull up that chair again. Tonight, I want to talk to you about something that took me the better part of 50 years to truly understand. And I say that not to make you feel bad about how long it might take you, but I say it so you know that what I'm about to tell you is hard won. Tonight, we are going to talk about the art of doing less. Not laziness, not giving up. Something much more interesting than that. Let's begin. The first thing I want you to understand is what busyness actually is. Because most people treat busyness like a virtue, like proof of something. A man says, "I've been so busy," and what he means is, "I'm important." And I understand that, and trust me, I do. But here's what I eventually figured out. Busyness is almost always just noise. It is movement that resembles progress without necessarily being progress. I knew a man once, sharp fella, worked longer hours than anyone I'd ever met. First in the office, last to leave, always doing. And I watched him for about 15 years. And I watched everything around him stay roughly the same. Same level, same problems, same frustrated feeling that the results never quite matched the effort. And then I knew another man, quieter, more deliberate. Worked maybe half the hours, but when he worked on the right things. He'd sit with a problem for a long time before touching it. He'd think before he'd act. He'd let things settle before he'd respond. And everything around him grew. The difference was that the second man understood something the first one never quite grasped. That activity is not the same thing as progress. Nor is spinning a wheel, no matter how fast it turns, it doesn't go anywhere. There's an ancient Chinese concept I want to tell you about tonight. It's called Wu Wei. Now I know that sounds like something you'd find on the self-help shelf at the bookstore, and I want you to hold on before you dismiss it. Because this idea is about 2,500 years old. And people don't keep an idea around for 2,500 years unless it's pointing at something real. Wu Wei comes from Taoism, from a philosopher named Lao Tzu, who lived in China somewhere around the 5th century before Christ. And it translates, roughly, as non-action. Or, my favorite way of putting it, not forcing. Now here's what it does not mean. It does not mean sitting still and hoping things work out. What it means, and this is the part I want you to really hear, is that the most effective action is the action that works with the nature of a situation rather than against it. Lao Tzu watched water. He watched it for a long time, and what he noticed was that the water is the softest thing in the world. You can put your hand through it. You can scatter it with a breath. It has no hardness, no resistance, no force of its own. And yet, water, over time, carved the Grand Canyon. Not by forcing, but by finding the path of least resistance. By being patient enough and consistent enough that the sheer persistence of its nature does what no amount of force could accomplish. That is Wu Wei. Think about the times in your own life when you pushed hardest. And I mean really pushed. Forced it. Stayed up late, got up early, drove yourself past what was reasonable. Now think about how many of those things actually went the way you planned. And then think about the times something good happened that you weren't even trying that hard for. The opportunity that came through a door you hadn't even knocked on. I'm not saying effort doesn't matter. I'm saying effort pointed in a direction that's incorrect, or used as a substitute for wisdom, is one of the great wastes of a human life. Marcus Aurelius. And regular listeners know I come back to this man often. He was the Roman emperor in the 2nd century, one of the most powerful men who ever lived. And in his private journals he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Now that sounds simple, maybe even obvious, but let's sit with it for a minute. You have power over your mind, not outside events. What Marcus was saying is that most of what we exhaust ourselves trying to control cannot actually be controlled. Sounds a lot like Lao Tzu, right? Other people's behavior, the economy, what happens next. Whether the thing we build succeeds or fails. None of that is in our hands. So what is in our hands? What we choose to focus on. What we do with what we've been given. The man who understands this, who really understands it, will never have to worry about wasting time seeming busy for validation, like I once did. Let me tell you something about saying no. Because the art of doing less is not just about how you work, it's about what you agree to do in the first place. I spent most of my 30s and 40s unable to say no. Somebody needed something. I said yes. An opportunity came along. I said yes. A request, a favor, a project. Yes, yes, yes. I thought I was being generous. I thought I was being capable. What I was actually doing was filling every available hour with other people's priorities. Steve Jobs said one thing that I think is fitting for this topic. He said that deciding what not to do is just as important as deciding what to do. Every yes you give is a no to something else. Every commitment you make is made with time and energy that won't be available for the next thing. Warren Buffett used to decide on commitments on the day before or the morning of. He's been known for keeping his schedule almost shockingly sparse. When people saw his calendar, they were stunned. It would have almost nothing on it for days at a time. No back-to-back meetings, no obligatory calls, no performative busyness. Just open, unstructured time. His reasoning was simple. Thinking is the work. For an investor, the most valuable thing you can do is read, reflect, and reason clearly. You can't do that if every hour is spoken for. He once said that he guards his time more carefully than almost anything else. This tied directly into something Buffett and his close circle practiced: a strong bias against committing to future obligations. The future you doesn't know what present you will need. If you commit to a lunch 3 weeks out, you've essentially handed away a slice of your most precious future resource based on how you felt weeks ago. By keeping the decision as close to the day as possible, you preserve optionality. You can say yes when it actually makes sense. The most effective people I have ever known, and I've known a few, were not the people who did the most things. They were the people who did fewer things completely, with their full attention. That full presence, applied to a smaller number of things, produced results that all the busy people around them, spinning their wheels, could never quite match. Now I want to talk about rest. In this culture, rest has been given a bad rap. We treat it like something you earn, like it's the reward at the end of a long day of hard enough work. And even then, a lot of people can't quite enjoy it, because somewhere in the back of their mind, a voice is telling them they should be doing something. That voice is wrong. Rest is part of the work. The ancient Romans had a word for it: otium. Otium was the intentional, protected time a person set aside for thinking, reading, and reflecting. The greatest Roman minds, Cicero, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, all practiced otium. They all understood the quality of their thinking depended on periods of genuine rest. Seneca wrote letters to a friend of his, letters that have survived 2,000 years, and in one of them he said, "It is not that I am brave enough to endure hard work, it is that I am wise enough to rest." The person who rests on purpose, who protects their stillness, that person comes back to their work with something that the person who never stops lacks: clarity. When the noise stops long enough, the real signal finds its way through. I've made some of the best decisions of my life in solitude, on a long walk, in the middle of the night when everything was still, in the space after I stopped trying to figure something out. The answer was almost always waiting in the quiet. Here's the last advice I want to tell you tonight, and then I'll let you go. If there's only one thing I want you to think on as you sleep, is about the difference between being busy and being present. The guidance you're looking for is in the nexus of these two things. I'll talk about me for a moment. When I look back on my life, some of the things I thought were so important, the things I was so busy with, I can barely remember them. And the things I remember, the things that feel real and warm and true when I look back at them now, were almost always the moments when I stopped. When I put down whatever I was doing and gave my full attention to something that deserved it. A conversation with my daughter when she was small. A meal that I ate slowly and actually tasted. Those moments weren't productive. Nobody was watching. But they are the substance of my life. They are what I'm made of when I look back. And I want you to hear this clearly. You are living your life right now, not later, not when the big project is finished or the debt is paid. Right now. This quiet moment is part of your life. And if you are always moving, always on to the next thing, you'll look back one day and find that you were present for very little of it. Do less. Rest on purpose. Trust that the river finds the sea without forcing. And every now and then, sit still long enough to notice that you are already exactly where you need to be. The art of doing less. Yes, I think I'll name this entry that.